Okay, today we're going to make some gluten-free bread, and this is different from regular bread because there's obviously no flour in it. Um, when we make things that are gluten-free in an area where there's gluten, so in this space in your home, if you use flour in your home, nothing is actually ever gluten-free. So you'll notice that I've labeled it gluten-friendly. It's because I can't guarantee that there's no flour in the space, on the table, in the bowl, contaminating our other ingredients. So it's gluten-friendly in that I have not intentionally added gluten to anything, but it may not be 100% gluten-free. So you just want to be careful on your words when you're talking about gluten-friendly versus gluten-free. So first thing we need to do is, just like any other bread, we're going to warm up our liquid. So you want to warm it up in the microwave on a double boiler in a pan, and you want it to be warmer than you, but not so hot that it stings. So if you stick your finger in it, it should feel warmer than body temperature, but you should be able to hold your finger in there for about 5 seconds without it stinging. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put all of our liquid ingredients in the bottom. So I've got my warm milk. I've put that in. And then this recipe calls for half an egg. So all I did was that I whisked up 1 egg just with a fork, and I'm going to add my 24 grams of egg to the oil here, just in the same container. Now, if you're making this all in one go today, that little bit of extra egg will be perfect in your brownies, so don't throw that away. So we're going to take our egg and our oil, put that in the bowl, and then what I want to do is I want to add the yeast. So we're using instant yeast today. Instant yeast just needs to be quickly dissolved in liquid. So we're going to put our yeast in the mixer there, let it get going with the liquid. Let me get rid of my scale. Okay, and then we're going to add our dry ingredients. So I've got the tapioca starch here, and then I've got all the rest of the dry ingredients in one container. You always want to separate the salt from the yeast in direct content. So I put a little bit of flour down first to make sure that the salt doesn't lay right on the yeast. You need salt to control yeast, but also too much salt kills it. So you never want to put them directly together. So we're going to make this a little bit differently because it's not regular bread. We're going to use the paddle instead of the hook. We would use the hook if we were trying to develop gluten, but there's no gluten to develop in this recipe, so I'm going to use the paddle. So pop the paddle on, pop the bowl up, and we're going to just mix it on speed 1. So we're just going to let this come together for a quick second on speed 1. And then we're going to scrape down the bowl. So now that it's come together, I'm just going to take my scraper, make sure I scrape up everything to make sure it gets mixed nice all the way through. You don't want any hard lumps. Really pay attention to that little knob on the bottom of the KitchenAid bowl. You really want to make sure there's nothing stuck in there. Okay? Now that everything's all scraped down, what we're going to do is we're going to turn up the speed a little bit and let it mix for about 4 minutes. Okay, once we've let that mix for a little while, let's talk about what we need to do next. The next thing you need to do is prepare your pans. So you want to get the 2 little foil pans and a little square of parchment paper, and you just want to tuck the parchment inside. And we're just going to give it a quick spray just to help it release when we're ready. Okay, so you want to make sure that that's all ready to go. Get those a little bit out of the way. Gluten is one of the hardest ingredients to replace. It's easy to replace sugar with replacements and so on, but the texture of gluten and the protein and how it works It's really challenging for bakers to replace. So in this recipe, you'll notice that there was flaxseed meal and xanthan gum. And those two things are going to help with the sponginess and with the ability of the bread to proof and hold its shape. If your dough looks a little wetter than this, don't worry about it. It comes out a little bit two different ways sometimes. A little bit dry, a little bit wet, it's fine. But what you want to do is you want to separate it into 2 equal portions. There we go. Okay, so now I'm just going to try and gently form this into a bit of a log. If yours is wetter, you can lay it into the pan and smooth it out. But since mine's a little bit drier, I'm going to be able to shape it a little bit. So I'm just trying to roll it into a bit of a snake, and I'm going to pay attention here to this seam. I don't want that. So I want to make sure that I pinch that shut and that the top surface is nice and smooth. Okay, so I'm going to just roll it and keep tapping it back until it'll fit my pan. So almost there. Okay, pop that in the pan. Do the same with the other piece. Okay, so sort of stretch and roll it a little bit. I'm going to pinch up that seam and then just gently roll it back and forth and sort of stuff it in until you get a nice smooth cylinder. There we go. I'll pop that in. Then what we're going to do is, if you have some cracks that have formed, you want to just take your fingers in a little bit of water, get them a little bit wet, and just literally rub it down until it smooths out any cracks or imperfections you might have. Okay, then we're going to put these on a tray, and they either go into the proofer until it's almost doubled in size, but if you don't have a proofer, you would just put them on a tray and cover them with some plastic wrap and put them in a nice warm spot. But make sure that they're covered with wrap. If not, the surface will dry out and they'll crack. So I'm going to put those in the proofer now, and we'll come back and check on them when they're doubled in size.